holiday gifts, easy to wrap. I guarantee you are going to love this book.
Hi there, this is Martin Popoff, scribbler of many rock books, and you are listening to Dave and Dave Unchained.
Hey folks, I'd like to introduce you to the Classic Rock Album by Album podcast. Welcome to the Classic Rock Album by Album podcast, where no stone is left unturned in the show's epic quest to review and dissect every single rock album ever made. Join self-proclaimed rock authorities Chris Carson and Lee Bowie on their epic journey to uncover the true classics. You can find the Classic Rock Album by Album podcast wherever podcasts can be found, including Spotify, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts. Our website address is classicrockalbumbyalbum.libsyn.com. That's LIBSYN.com. And we can be reached on Facebook at fb.me/Classic Rock Album by Album. See you soon from the Classic Rock Album by Album podcast.
Van Halen, heavy metal music, any kind of rock music is what I call high velocity folk. I look at heavy metal music, Van Halen's brand rather, of heavy metal music as a combination of religion and hockey.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, we have a special guest this month. His name is Andy Aledort. He is an associate editor for Guitar World magazine, but he is also a guitarist who has his own band, the Groove Kings, and he had a long tenure with Dickie Betts and Great Southern. Currently, you could add author to that list because he has an upcoming book coming out called Texas Flood, the inside story of Stevie Ray Vaughan, which is taking pre-orders on Amazon.com. So, Andy, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me, David. I appreciate it.
Awesome. Well, Andy was part of a Guitar World cover story that came out in the mid-90s, if you guys remember it, when Billy Corgan interviewed Eddie Van Halen, and Andy was part of that trip. He went to 5150 and oversaw that whole thing, so we wanted to talk to him about that and some other stuff. So just to start off, we wanted to ask you, how would you describe Eddie's relationship with Guitar World? You guys seem pretty tight with him, right?
Oh, yeah. I came over to Guitar World in 93. Unless it was the beginning of 94, but
okay.
The feeling for me at the time was that I hadn't been at Guitar World that long.
Right.
And although I'd been writing for guitar magazines for 10 years, I was the music editor for a magazine called Guitar for the Practicing Musician.
Sure.
It was a very successful magazine. I mean, Eddie seemed to have a very good, close relationship with all the guitar magazines. I mean, in the 80s, of course.
Right.
He was probably on the cover of one of those magazines.
Right.
Every other month, you know. Maybe 3 months would go by, and then he'd be on the cover of the next issue.
Right.
So for all of us that are fans, we can remember well when he was on the cover, you know, for when OU812 came out, or, you know, when Carl Knowledge came out. You know what I mean?
Right,
like we remember when the records were released, and then he would do press. And at that time, I guess his sobriety was something that was a relatively new thing. So, you know, he would talk about it in interviews, and he did talk about it that day that we were up there.
Yeah, he was newly cleaned up and looking very healthy and was in good shape. Obviously, he had Wolfie at the time, who was born a few years prior, and, you know, things were flowing for him, and he had cut his hair. He had the spiky hair, and he was sort of in a good place, although things were rumbling within the band at that point, believe it or not. So that was...
believe me, he talked about it like nonstop.
Oh, really?
And what did he say?
He just ragged on Sammy Hagar endlessly. Just endlessly, you know. But Eddie, you know, my only experience with him in person was this one day, but it was a very long day that we were up at that house and in the studio. So, I mean, he kind of ragged on everybody. Not Alex, though. Alex was there floating in and out. It's just the feeling I got was that was Eddie's sort of sense of humor and his demeanor was to pick on people. Like he was even picking on Corgan.
Really?
You know, just like it's, you know, like needling.
Just
you
breaking
know, like
chops.
It's just like it was just his sense of humor. But it didn't seem like it was a joke when he was saying like, well, you know, it'd be nice if Sammy would come here, you know, so we could make a record, or so he could come and put his vocals on because like everything's done, and like he just kept belly aching about Sammy, like over and over and over and over again.
Wow,
you know?
wow, yeah.
Now, how did you get assigned to that story?
Well, I think it was because if you roll back a couple of years, I did the first Guitar World story with Billy Corgan.
Okay.
Right when Siamese Dream came out, their second album, and the song Today was a really big song. And so I did an interview with him. They were playing Roseland, Smashing Pumpkins. Mm-hmm. And it's funny to think about because Billy, you know, he still has hair on his head.
Right.
And, you know, for anybody that's a Smashing Pumpkins fan, they remember his silver Strat that had little black bats on it.
Sure.
And it also said, I think it said Mom on his guitar. Mom or Mother, but I think it said Mom.
Right.
So he was playing that, and I had heard him complain in interviews about being misquoted in other interviews. You know what I mean? Like, Billy was always sort of, I don't know if cerebral is the right word, but he liked to analyze things a lot. And so anyway, we had a great interview. It was fun. And then after it came out, it was for Guitar School magazine. And the next time I saw him, he said when that interview came out, it was the first time, he goes, like, I was at a Burger King, and, you know, drive-through, and they were like, oh my God, you're the guy on the cover of, you know, Guitar School magazine. It was like the first time that ever happened to him.
Wow.
People were, and he also loved the interview.
Cool.
He said, you're the first person that didn't misquote me. Anything I said, every single thing.
Wow.
The way our conversation was exactly the same. So then I went and did another story with them. So I had established a relationship with them.
Sure.
By them. I went to his house in Lincoln Park, Chicago, because I was ghostwriting his column for Guitar World. Mm-hmm. It's funny because he made me soup and a sandwich. You know, I got there at lunchtime, and he made me soup and a sandwich, and he had he was in the midst of recording Melancholy.
Wow.
So, like, no one had heard any of those songs yet.
That's amazing.
And he was playing the tapes of, you know, Bullet with Butterfly Wings and all these songs.
Wow.
And I was just like, this shit sounds really good, man. You know? And this is a whole aside about Corgan, but it's just interesting.
Absolutely.
This is interesting because he said, I'm very excited about this record, but I'm also sad. And I said, why? And he goes, because I know that this record is going to be huge, and it's going to be the biggest thing we ever did. And after it comes out, it's going to be downhill from there.
Wow.
He was seeing that already. Like, it was really prescient of him.
He's a pretty sharp
He
dude.
knew.
Yeah.
It was pretty wild. But
yeah.
So I thought, wow, that's like incredibly mature of this young guy to sort of see this big picture. But then when it happened, he was really angry. So I thought, what happened? You know, like, he predicted it.
Right.
Like 2 years before. And that's a whole other thing, because I don't know if you're familiar with the album Amore, which was the album that came out after Melancholy.
Yep.
And so Amore is a really great album.
Yep.
I think.
Yeah, I agree.
Perfect is on that record, which was the single.
Right.
But I mean, this is the thing. Melancholy sold 16 times platinum.
Wow.
Amore only sold, you ready?
Yeah.
It only sold like 950,000 copies.
Wow.
I mean, today nobody sells anywhere near that many albums,
right,
like a million albums.
Right.
And so it was deemed by the record company a failure.
Right.
And so I think he was more upset about that than anything else.
Of course.
Was that if he had a million seller 3 years before that, he would have been the happiest guy in the world. But you follow up a 16 times platinum with something that doesn't even hit a million, and everybody's disappointed. So anyway, I guess what all this illustrates is that I had gotten to know Billy really well. So I think that's why they asked me to go, because I met him in the city a couple times and went up to his hotel room, play guitars, and and I've seen him a few times over the years, because that's a long time ago. You know, that's 24 years ago, something like that. Mm-hmm. No, he's just a good guy. You know, I like him.
I like him a lot. I like him a lot. He's very bright.
So how
Oh,
did
yeah.
the idea come to have him interview Ed?
It was Billy's idea.
Really?
Billy, in a conversation with Brad Talinsky, who was the editor-in-chief, said, "Will you guys let me interview my hero,
Wow.
Eddie Van Halen?" And like the song 1979, he told me that, I mean, he doesn't name check Van Halen,
Right.
but he's talking about like the context of the lyrics are being at like pool parties and stuff like that.
Sure.
In 1979 around the cool kids.
Yep.
And the soundtrack, he told me, like in his mind, was like Dancing in the Streets by Van Halen and stuff like that.
Dance the night
know,
away.
like-
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So like that was sort of the image he had in his mind when he wrote 1979,
Wow.
which is just interesting, you know.
Wow. Yeah, definitely.
So anyway, you know, he made no bones about the fact that Eddie Van Halen was like his biggest guitar hero, and he wanted to interview him.
Wow. Did they know each other or no?
No,
Wow.
not at all.
Wow.
And, you know, we didn't even know if Eddie was that familiar with the Pumpkins. You know, they were still a pretty new band.
Right.
Because I think Melancholy came out in 94,
Right.
I think.
Mm-hmm.
I think it did. And that's what really put them over the top, you know.
Sure.
So he was aware of who Smashing Pumpkins were and who
Right.
Billy Corgan was,
Right.
but not much.
Right.
You know? I mean, I always got the feeling Eddie, you know, was not a guy like listening to pop radio very much.
No,
Was
he makes
more
it-
interested, more interested in doing his own thing, you know. So
Right.
he was very nice to Billy.
Was Billy in full hero worship mode, or was he calm, cool, and collected?
I would say it was a little of both.
Okay.
You know, he didn't want to disguise his love and, you know, affection for Eddie, you know.
Mhm.
Having the opportunity to go there and go into 5150, you know, gave him the opportunity to tell Eddie how much he loved him, you know.
Right.
So Billy wasn't going in there to like go, well, I'm a rock star too. He just went in there like, you know, I think you're the greatest thing ever.
Well, interesting enough, though, I was rereading the piece today, and he actually says straight out to Eddie, I really listened to your stuff all the way up to 84, but I really wasn't familiar with the Sammy Hagar years. I had to sort of brush up before I did this interview, because he actually almost says I stopped listening to the band. Did Eddie have any sort of reaction to that?
Well, I don't remember that moment
okay.
in the interview, no. And, you know, I think I was more, I mean, I never been in 5150 before either.
Okay.
So it was sort of interesting. You know, I was just sort of taking it in, you know.
Right.
And looking at this, you know, conversation between Billy and Eddie and seeing, you know, what it was like and how, you know, what Billy wanted to ask and how Eddie reacted to those things. And, I mean, you know, you guys know Van Halen's personality a lot better than I do.
Yep.
You know, he can be very self-effacing.
Yep.
Even though we know he has a solid ego.
Sure.
So, I mean, he likes to crack jokes, you know,
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
and sort of, you know, make light of things. So, you know, he was doing that a lot into my recollection. I could tell you, though, that the thing that I remember more than anything else is that at one point he was sitting in a chair playing guitar and he was talking. It was like he wasn't really paying attention at all. He didn't seem to be as to what he was playing on a solid body electric guitar that wasn't plugged in.
Right.
You know, he was just sort of noodling while he was talking.
Right.
And the way it sounded, he sounded just like Eddie Van Halen on a record, like through a Marshall.
Wow.
Like the amount of sound coming off of his fingers on the guitar
That's incredible.
was insane.
Right. That's
It was
incredible.
like a guy like putting everything into his, you know, trying to play, and he wasn't putting anything into it at all.
That's amazing. Now, prior to going in, did you have a prep with Billy? Did you go over his questions?
Nope.
Nothing.
No.
Really?
Billy showed up in a limo, and we showed up in a taxi cab. You know, Coldwater Canyon.
Right.
The Pumpkins played the night before somewhere. I don't remember the name of the venue. It was across the street from Capitol Records off of Sunset in L.A. And we were so late, me and Brad, that we walked in and sat down, and then they finished the song and said goodnight.
Wow.
It was like,
That's pretty late.
Wow.
yeah, it was kind of a bummer.
Okay.
It was a bummer. We missed like the whole show. So then the next morning we went up, you know, it's Coldwater Canyon, right next to Laurel Canyon.
Right.
You know, those two streets are next to each other.
Right.
And they buzzed us in. When we left, Eddie came down to the gate and like hugged everybody. I remember that, which was kind of interesting.